Today's video is going to be a little longer, but it is definitely going to help you grow your audience.
The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson.
Hey, I'm Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com, where I help you plan, launch, and grow your podcast. And if you want to, I got a book back there, monetize that podcast. And before we get into today's topic, and you're going to want to stick around, please, if you like this, give me the thumbs up, subscribe, ring the bell. It's Christmas time as I do this, and, bells are kind of in style. So it is the end of the year here in 2022, and I haven't surveyed my audience since 2019. And think of surveys this way. If you went to a restaurant and somebody came out and you're like, oh, I've been waiting for this bread all day, because who cares about carbs? And you eat it and you're like, there's no salt in this. Ick. Well, okay, so they gave you some content, you gave them feedback, they go back in the kitchen, they come back out, how's this? And you're like, oh, much better. That's really one of the reasons why you want to do a survey. The second one is advertising, because advertisers are going to want to know who the heck listens to your show. So that's the whole demographic. Are you married, single? How much money do you make? Do you have kids? All those questions that we get every time we take a survey. But the second one for me is, hey, am I going in the right direction? Because, like I said, I haven't surveyed my audience in 3 years. And have you ever been, you miss your turn and all of a sudden the GPS says, yeah, at the nearest, do a U-turn, and you're like, wait, what? Did I miss something? So I want to make sure I'm still on track. So here are a couple things when it comes to surveys. Number one, there's all sorts of SurveyMonkey and Typeform and things like that. If you're on a budget, use Google Forms. It's forms.google.com, where the other ones always have a limit on how many questions you can ask and how many responses you can get. Google Forms, super easy. And the results go into a Google Sheet. So if you want to, if you need to do some number crunching, you can do that. But what questions do you ask? Well, for me, I'm looking to make sure my content is still what my audience wants. And I got these questions from Jack Reicher over at darknetdiaries.com. That guy gets 6 figures per episode. Yeah, it's a lot of downloads. But listen to the questions he asked. He said, listen to this episode. Okay, how far did you listen? And if you didn't listen all the way, what stopped you from listening all the way? And then what was the big takeaway from that episode? Because you might have those people like, oh, I loved it. And then you're like, great, what was your big takeaway? And they're like, yeah, they didn't listen. So what's your big takeaway? And then here's the big one, because 70% of podcast growth comes from people sharing it with other people per Jacobs Media. And that is, he said, hey, on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to share this episode with somebody? And he was not happy with 7s or 6s, because if you put that on the old grading scale, 6 is a D, 7 is a C, 8s are a B, and then 90s are an A. And he was looking for 90s. And he just kept going back into the kitchen to get it right. Now, those are hard questions sometimes to, you listen to 3.8 seconds of it. Did you even make it through the theme song? But there's no sense promoting this. Who wants bread with no salt? Go tell your friends, and your friends are going to go, yeah. It has to get right first before we do that. One other tip, when you're doing on a scale from 1 to whatever, make that 1 to whatever an even number. So if I said between 1 and 5, on a scale from 1 to 5, how are you likely to share this? There are a lot of people that are going to go for that 3. I got to watch how I do this, right? If they do 3, you can't really tell if they were more into it or more out to it. If you do 4, now they got to figure out, am I a little more negative or a little more positive? That's the cool thing about if you're doing any kind of on a scale from 1 to whatever, make that whatever even, and it gives you a little more insights into that. You want to leave your survey and you need to promote it on your show. I would recommend a month. And here's the really depressing part. If you're really good, you're going to get about 5%. If you're really good, you might get 1% or 0.9%. It's just the way it is. Now you can kind of bring that up by offering some sort of gift, whether it's a $25 gift certificate from Amazon, something that needs a little incentive. And I know some people are like, well, if they're not willing to do it without an incentive, then I don't want their feed. No, you have to give them something. Well, you don't have to, but for me, I do. And it helps. And usually these are people that listen to your podcast. So they explain to them, this show is for you. Tell me what you want. And they will actually give you that information. Remember, they like you if you're giving them value. When you get the feedback, that's the tricky part. I actually do a show every Saturday with Jim Carlson. It's called Ask the Podcast Coach. And we got a lot of feedback from one person who did super detailed. Back on February at the 4-minute mark, you guys said blah, blah, blah. And on this show, he just went on like detailed feedback. There was only one problem. That show is supposed to be a live show where I take questions from wannabe podcasters and current podcasters. He wanted us to do interviews. And I was like, I really appreciate your feedback, but that's not what this show does. Feel free to find any of the other 8 million shows out there that do interviews. Now, if he had said, hey, I think you guys should come up with some topics that you know you're going to talk about so I can decide if I want to stay, that would be good feedback, because we just go where the audience goes with their questions. But if I had one topic maybe that I always started off the show with, today we're going to talk about surveys, they would know if they want to stick around or not. So you have to know what you're going to do with that feedback. And if for some reason somebody is just not your target audience, that's okay. If you try to be everything to everyone, it's just not going to work. You have to know who your audience is. You have to know why you're doing this. And then the interaction, that overlap between here's what I can talk about that's going to hold their attention and yet help me achieve my goal. I don't understand why nobody is doing this. I understand sometimes where they don't list their show in different places because maybe they're not confident. The only way to be confident in your content is to have somebody go, yes, this is good. And if that is your target audience, that's good. Now, one last point. Mom doesn't count. Uncle Joe, Brother Steve, Sister Nancy, nope. Because they're going to go, oh, you sound so professional. Yeah. Notice that's not commenting on the content. Look at you with your microphone. Oh, look at that. Yeah, they're not talking about the content. As we head into a new year, seriously consider, because it doesn't cost you anything. Well, a $25 gift certificate to Amazon, or maybe you have some sort of coaching or consulting you can give away. One way to know if you're headed in the right direction, because there's nothing worse than realizing that, wow, for the past 45 minutes, I've been going south when I should have been going north. Now, if you need some help straightening out that compass and helping you figure out where you want to go so you can avoid all those common pitfalls, come over and visit me at theschoolofpodcasting.com.